Truth is, I thought it mattered. I thought that
money
mattered. But does it bollocks? Not compared to how people matter.
Welcome, mention and other fine folks to the Someday Dispatch of the Black Letter, where we contemplate thoughts worth thinking. Today we're going to focus primarily on Captain Crypto and his sidekicks. There's also a little bit on Jerome Powell and promising more Fed puts. So let's see where we're at today. Forbes has an article here. Protesters around the world are putting their hopes into cryptocurrency. Here's a guy holding a cryptocurrency, a Bitcoin QR code. To protest movements that are threatened by the use of state force, cryptocurrencies are becoming almost instrumental. At a recent protest for Black Lives Matter, one of the speakers talked about Bitcoin as an alternate for the financial systems. Chinese netizens have used Ethereum to make sure that messages that would otherwise be censored in online protest could live as long as possible, secured by a network of coordinating nodes. In Hong Kong, cryptocurrency has helped finance the distribution of supplies to protesters. Some protests seemed focused on the very ills cryptocurrency first arose in opposition to, such as an out-of-control and out-of-touch monetary system, which obviously is still a concern, controlled by the very few and designed to benefit those closest to the halls of power. And we've seen that. All the stimulus so far and the central bank buying of bonds and corporate bonds and all sorts of other things they're doing nothing for the man on the street mostly. It's mostly going to hedge funds and into the stock market. As we've seen, the stock market is just dizzy in heights. Art collectives are using blockchain to protest in the United States. People are mining Monero with the intent of providing funds for bail. Monero is a privacy-focused coin. Cryptocurrency's rare ability to hold value outside of the context of centralized monetary authorities and private banking systems that must stay utterly loyal to the state is starting to show its value. We've seen governments from Iran to Venezuela to China censor the internet and the free flow of information whenever it was convenient for them, or wherever would best consolidate the power of these respective states. They are likely to do the same with any digital means of exchange directly under their control, and have much more granular control over rewarding and punishing those who deviate from central state ideology. As a result, protesters and protest movements around the world are starting to put their faith in cryptocurrencies. That was by Roger Wang. Interesting article. You've certainly seen photos like this, I'm sure, of folks carrying Bitcoin QR codes or placards with Bitcoin or cryptocurrency messages. I think that's the joy of cryptocurrency generally, Bitcoin specifically, is that it was birthed out of the previous great financial crisis. And so here we have something that can continue to help the unbanked, those in the marginalized communities, right? Okay, so here's another article from Tron Weekly. Don't place your faith on XRP. Crypto heavyweight warns. XRP is from Ripple, as we know, and a lot of folks, including myself, think that XRP has a great potential. My opinion, I think within the next 10 years, XRP could end up being worth $1,000 a coin, perhaps more, who knows, just as I believe that Bitcoin could see $1 million per coin by the end of the decade. Nevertheless, my approach here in investing generally is always trying to hold two opposite ideas simultaneously in my mind. And so what do I mean by that? As much as I believe in cryptocurrency, I'm always looking to challenge that belief. And so it's important, I think, in any investing you do. And again, I'm just speaking for entertainment purposes and just offering you input as to what I'm doing and how I think about thoughts worth contemplating. So with cryptocurrencies and investing generally, I'm always looking to the other side of the argument or the other side of the coin for the argument that I'm making. So is cryptocurrency a good bet? I believe it is. I think there's great potential, especially currently. I can't personally see any options other than precious metals or cryptocurrencies that are either slightly undervalued or very undervalued in order to try and get us through the future in helping our savings grow, or at the very least keeping them as a store of value. So don't place your faith on XRP, says a heavyweight. Ripple XRP sentiments have been mostly bearish for the better part of the year. And what's been happening, as we've seen, is that for better part of a year, XRP has not really been doing much. It's been sitting in a very narrow band. Crypto veteran trading and analyst Peter Brandt called out on all investors to lay asunder their trust on XRP by simply stating, don't place your faith on Ripple XRP. And here you go. He's talking about item 14, don't place your faith in XRP, and then he has other things unrelated to really what he's talking about. Now, I don't want to get into the whole generational thing about folks who don't get cryptocurrency. Peter Brand certainly looks like an older guy, probably a boomer generation, I guess. In the past, Brand claimed how XRP was manipulated by folks at Ripple and challenged the massive amount of XRP held by the company in relation to the total supply. Several other analysts have been negative about XRP's massive sales, which could contribute to the lackluster performance of the altcoin. And I think what's happening with Ripple, they were, I think, originally had 100 billion max supply, I believe. Let's have a look. Okay, so here we see at Coin Marketplace that the maximum supply of Ripple is 100 billion, which is decent. I, for myself, I like to see coins that have a maximum amount rather than an indefinite amount. Otherwise, I struggle to see what the difference is between them and fiat currency, right? Which is just money printing. Doesn't say it here, but I believe that Ripple has decided to sell most of that into the marketplace. And so they've been doing this on an ongoing basis. And I understand that that's creating some, obviously, a greater supply. And when you have a greater supply of something, things generally fall in value, right? And so that's what that's talking about, these massive sales of XRP. Blockchain researcher Jeff Goldberg had previously reported thousands of fake Ripple shills and XRP bots that were used to manipulate social media sentiments on Twitter. So, interesting article. Not a lot of meat to it. And when I'm looking for arguments against why cryptocurrency is going to be doing well, I like to see some meat on those bones. I don't see much more than a pretty skinny skeleton at the moment. I don't see anything that would dissuade me from my current thesis that cryptocurrency has great runway and a great potential, including especially XRP. But it's always important to keep these two opposing thoughts in your mind if you can, to always continue to test the metal of your ideology and your argument for why something you believe you're putting your money in has validity. Sort of a way to hone that knife's edge and cut through the nonsense to figure out if what you're doing with your money, your investment, your savings is actually valid. And so I'm always looking at these opposing ideas to see if I can be dissuaded one way or the other. Currently, I continue to hold great faith in Bitcoin, XRP, Ether. Those are primarily my top holdings. I have a little bit of Litecoin, I think, as I've mentioned, and some Stellar. I believe in Stellar as well. I'm not as convinced with Stellar as I am with XRP, for example. Stellar and XRP are in sort of the similar sandbox. With Stellar focusing more on the unbanked and the poor as a non-profit, Ripple focusing, in my opinion, as I understand it, more into the interbank market and the exchanges between banks and people as well, but more focused on that as a for-profit organization. Ripple executive says Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP hit with surprising levels of hostility to innovation. So again, this is also all about looking for arguments against my thesis that cryptocurrencies are doing well, and let's see what it says. So this is the Ripple Chief Technology Officer, David Schwartz, says a surprising level of hostility in the crypto community are hampering the growth of the industry as a whole. Schwartz said crypto owners tend to get tribal due to their desire to earn a return on investment, showing remarkable levels of animosity towards rival technologies. And you see this all over the place. You see this especially in Seeking Alpha in the comments there, where people own certain stocks and they can't seem to see an alternative as to why perhaps a stock is overvalued or undervalued. If they own it, they think it's not overvalued. If they're shorted, they think it's not undervalued. This sort of thing. And he says, David Schwartz goes on to say, I can't talk about the cryptocurrency space without facing the reality that if you think Bitcoin is going to take over the world, you probably own some Bitcoin, and that's very true. Schwartz cites Bitcoin as an example, explaining why investors of the King coin may not welcome improvements in other cryptocurrencies. He experienced the same frustrating phenomenon and lack of unity in the legacy financial system. So, is this a sign of cryptocurrency maturing? Or is it just generally human nature, where if you own something, you're more focused on proving that it's going to do well? It's that whole quote that we've seen before. Here, let me show you. So it's that quote by Upton Sinclair, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. And then here, if his income or investment outcomes depend on his not understanding it. And of course, this goes for women as well, but back in the day, I guess, that's how things were. So this is the case here as human nature, and this is why I continue to try and challenge my ideas, and I'd recommend that you do the same. Challenge your sacred cows, if you will, to see if they still hold up against an attack. I'm agnostic generally towards a specific investment vehicle, other than unless I believe in it, and if I think that potential is greater than perhaps the con side, pros being much greater than the cons. However, I enjoy cryptocurrency not only for the great potential returns I foresee coming, but also for what it stands for and helping us getting outside of the banking system and the bankster system, right? And the government gangsters. I think it's a way for us to take back some control over our own lives and destiny and our future, and maintain a store of value in what we earn through our blood, sweat, and tears, right? Bitcoin was like a radical movement, and now it's the institution that people don't want you to threaten now. And that's true. I think I've seen this a lot. You see it a lot, especially with Bitcoin maximalists who can't seem to think beyond that. They think all other cryptocurrencies are trash. Perhaps they might even think that gold is no longer going to be viable because Bitcoin is going to take over that digital store of value that gold has physically had over the millennia. I don't see that as happening. I think there's room for both. But it's still important to understand where folks are coming from and to attack your own sacred cows, as I mentioned, your own ideologies, just to see if they hold up. Otherwise, you could be holding on to something that is incorrect, and your thesis could break down and you wouldn't even know it. So I like to sort of test my theses, if you will. Here's another example of that. So this is an article that is really quite bearish on cryptocurrency. As pandemic struck, cryptocurrencies failed a key test, says David Dushar. But one major thesis of cryptocurrency enthusiasts was that, similar to gold, they could act as safe havens, hedges against the movements of major market indices and macroeconomic conditions like inflation. Then it goes on to say that Bitcoin and Ethereum, we can find not only did the cryptocurrencies fail to get as a safe haven, to act as a safe haven during this crisis, but as a whole over the entire period since their inception, which is nonsense because he only chooses to go back barely to the beginning of this year. And even there, his thesis doesn't hold up. You can see S&P 500 is still down from the beginning of the year pretty much, whereas both Ethereum and Bitcoin are higher. So I'm not sure what his insights are trying to suggest. While Bitcoin and Ethereum have been found to have significantly higher returns than those of major market indices, they exhibit far greater standard deviation. Well, and that's, I think, to be expected from a new asset class that has a very small market cap. It's much easier to be manipulated, so volatility will be much higher because also risk is higher, right? I mean, Bitcoin, the granddaddy of them all, is only about 11 years old right now, right? The others may be 5, 6, 7 years at the most. So this is still the early days, the very early innings of cryptocurrency, and it is risky. I wouldn't put my whole net worth into it. I'm certainly not, but I'm probably comfortable building up to a 10 or so % of cryptocurrency holdings. Anyway, so he makes an argument that doesn't hold up under even just the lightest scrutiny, and you can see that from many of the comments. I'll pick up this one here just specifically. The author also dishonestly manipulates data to prove his thesis, and that's unfortunate. Here he goes. Here are the author's 2 dishonest uses of data. He talks about the author using price behavior during a 2-month window at the height of an unprecedented worldwide liquidity crisis that impacted all assets, to conclude that Bitcoin is highly correlated to other assets, and that's not the case over the long term, and I don't think it will be the case long term either into the future. I think Bitcoin will decouple generally as gold has over time to become a store of value. Then the author looks at the June 2016 to June 2020 time period and makes the point that Bitcoin experiences massive volatility and compares the average weekly gain loss for stocks with what he incorrectly calls the average weekly gain loss for Bitcoin. But those are the maximum weekly gain losses for Bitcoin, not the average. And then S&P 500, if you look at the maximum weekly loss, has been in the 20% range. So anyway, interesting article. It didn't really hold up to much scrutiny, but it's important, as I mentioned, to try and figure out if your thesis is cohesive, right? And to do that, you need to be able to hold 2 opposing thoughts simultaneously, I believe. Interesting article. You can now buy Bitcoin at CVS, 7-Eleven, and Rite Aid. A little bit misleading headline. It's not that those companies are specifically allowing you to buy Bitcoin through them, but through a Bitcoin ATM operator, Liberty X, which is now offering Bitcoin purchases at the United States' most popular convenience and drugstores. So We're starting to see really movement of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies generally becoming easier to obtain, to buy and sell. And as that does, and as it starts to get ingrained in the popular culture and to society at large, we'll see it become even easier and easier. And as it does become easier and easier, it'll be more of an uptake in the general public. However, there is a little bit of a downside to this, as we'll see at the very bottom. The service requires a phone number for verification, which by itself is not the end of the world, but it charges an 8% conversion fee, including a $5 retailer service fee. And I think that should be on top of a $5 retailer service fee. I'm not certain, but I mean, if you buy $50 of Bitcoin, 8% conversion fee is not even going to cover the retailer fee, right? That'll be $4 on $50. So there you go. That's excessive, folks. You can do way better than that. I wouldn't be buying Bitcoin there, but still, if the general public wants to get into Bitcoin that way, that's one way of doing it, right? Okay, and lastly, a little bit on the Jerome Powell. Reasonable probability that Congress, Fed will need to do more for recovery. And we know this. This is from, a few days ago. And he says in a congressional testimony, a question we all have to answer over time is it enough, Mr. Powell told the Senate Banking Committee. I would say there's a reasonable probability that more will be needed, both from you and from the Fed. A major point of contention for the next round is whether to extend a $600 per week boost in federal unemployment benefits that is set to expire at the end of July. Now, this is interesting because I'm not certain if this will pass, honestly. I think the Democrats will probably be in favor of it, the Republicans not so much. However, as we get closer to the election, you never know, the Republicans might start leaning a little bit more liberally towards helicopter money if it's showing in the polls that the public really appreciates that. But I don't know how you can simultaneously give people more money to stay at home than they were getting at work and expect the jobs to come back. So it's a bit of a difficult corner they've painted themselves into here. I'm not sure how that's going to roll out. And it's going to continue to take more and more money printing. So this is worrying from a variety of levels, but perhaps overall good for cryptocurrencies and precious metals. Anyway, folks, there you have it. Time to go to the magic 8-ball. But before we get there, let's just think about where we're at. So we're in a situation that's unprecedented, that I think will probably be turning to the greatest depression, and I hope I'm wrong. Maybe we'll just have a long, drawn-out recession. Things are opening, things are starting to come back, but cases of coronavirus are rising, as we know. 10 states, I think, recently have had a greater than 50% uptick in cases. And as long as this continues to happen, we don't have a vaccine, I think folks are going to be reticent to be spending at the same rates that they used to. And when 70% or so of your economy relies on consumer spending, then you have real problems, real systemic problems in that economy, I would argue. More than that, folks, we're being led like sheep to the great fleecing, as I've mentioned. I think it's important for us to step away from that, to get off the consumer treadmill. Can't take any of this with you, folks. Borrow a slave to the lender, as it says in the Bible. It's absolutely true. Now's the time to really be building up a fortress. So what I'm doing is paying down all the debt I can and saving a little bit of money, putting it into precious metals and cryptocurrency to hopefully tide me over. I don't see a great outcome in the next 18 months to 3 years that doesn't see either a devaluation of the currency or a hyperinflation situation. And so we need to be prepared for that. And if we get deflation, well, cryptocurrency and precious metals will do okay. If we get inflation, then they're going to do terrifically. And we need to be able to store some value for that kind of a future. My opinion, I could be wrong. I hope I am, because it doesn't sound great. I agree. So the question I have today for the Magic 8-Ball is, will we have inflation by the end of 2021? Now, I'm not certain about hyperinflation, but I think there's a good chance that we'll start to see real great inflation starting to take up by the end of 2021 at latest. I mean, I don't think it'll happen this year. I think there's too much money printing. I think folks are still too scared to go out and spend. And so a lot of that money is not seen out into the economy. As soon as it does, then of course inflation is going to start creeping up. So I think that could happen by the end of next year. So what is it? Let me shake the 8-ball. Outlook is good that we will have inflation by the end of 2021. There you go, folks. It'll be interesting. I should maybe track these questions I ask the Magic 8-Ball and see if they actually happen. Perhaps I'll do that. I'll set up a spreadsheet of the Magic 8-Ball questions and the answers and see what happens. But, it'll take a long time to get there anyway. And Can we really keep track of that? How do we track inflation, right? I mean, the numbers they give you in the core inflation index, the CPI, are they're nonsense, frankly. They don't really show what's happening to the public on the street, right? There you have it, folks. Thanks so much for joining me. Appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on cryptocurrencies. If the Fed and the Treasury will continue to give unemployed folks $600 a week. And remember, let's see where we're going. Try to figure out the best route there for ourselves, for our families, for our loved ones, so that we can create some savings and a better future for ourselves to get through this difficult time. I appreciate you. Thanks for stopping by. You take care. And remember, dum spiro, sparrow.